Hi, I'm Robert. Welcome back to another edition of the High Desert Ranch channel. Today we're going to go over the annual cost to keep a boar and go over some things to consider. So, right there, we're going to talk a little about Duran and how much he costs the ranch only on the High Desert Ranch channel. All right, so when it comes to breeding stock, and I appreciate you joining, if you haven't watched some of our other videos, please do so in the breeding stock series, where we talk not only about boars, but sows, gilts, first-year gilts, and even piglets and feeder hogs, or fats, whatever you want to call it, your bacon hogs. But today we're going to talk about a boar and the cost, and there's a few things to consider. We will be talking about the cost of a heritage breed hog. So Duran is a Duroc boar. He's a purebred Duroc, and if you know where the name Duran comes, please leave in the comments section below. You'll find out a little bit more about some of my interests outside of animal husbandry with the name Duran. There is some things to consider when it comes to raising a breeding stock. There's obviously with any animal there's going to be work involved, and there's definitely a big time commitment. And if you're not ready for that, or if you're a first time, if you've just moved, purchased some property, or you're just looking to raise some pigs for the first time to have some healthy pork for you and your family, I would recommend just doing like a feeder hog, or one that you buy as a piglet and feed out and take it to the butcher shop and be processed, because there's an end in mind, as a 6-month period or so. Whereas with the boar or a sow, anyone that's going to be part of your breeding, you're going to have them for several years. So there's definitely that. I've seen it where people buy animals and then it becomes too much of a commitment, and then they have to sell it at a loss, and in the meantime the animal has suffered. So just some things to consider when it comes to that. So anyways, we get on to one of the first things to consider, and that is the cost to purchase a boar. And you'll see with some of these breeding stock video series, sometimes it's cheaper to buy a boar that somebody's already raised because of the input costs and things like that. So check out my other video, the cost to raise a boar up to breeding age, which depending on the boar size, when you're talking heritage breeds, Duran looks like he bred a first-year gilt here just a while back, and he was about 7 months old. So there is some cost to consider if you're going to start out with a little piglet and raise it up to the point where they can actually breed the boar. So, but if you're going to look for a reputable breeder that has one that's of breeding age, you're going to be right around $350. Some people come with papers. To me, it really doesn't matter, just as long as it has good genetics from a reputable breeder, and it has good lines and just a good overall shape to the boar. So at $350, you are going to be, and I'll put some graphics up here because I like to do that. You're going to get a minimum 3 good breeding years out of them, possibly 4. The thing about any pig, and especially a boar, is even on a very strict diet, and we're going to talk about feed costs, they're going to continue to gain weight until they're just too big to breed. And then you've just got to get rid of them. You got to cull them. So we're going to go with 3 years. So at $350, you're looking at $116 per year. As far as your cost, because again, the thing that I get tired about with these YouTube channels is they just say, oh, I made so much money, but they don't talk about the input costs. And that's the thing that a lot of people that are new, it makes or breaks, is your input cost. So at $116 a year, and we're talking about annual cost in this video, next comes your feed cost, because the purchase cost isn't even the most expensive part. In fact, it's second to feed. And so with your feed cost, and again, there's the other video about getting the cost to bring up a boar to breeding, the point of being able to breed. Once you reach that point, you cut back on the feed. And so you're right around 3.5 pounds a day. It's a maintenance ration. Again, when you make those cutbacks, the boar doesn't like it, and he's always ready to eat more. But if you want to have a boar for at least 3 years, you've got to stick to that strict regimen of 3.5 pounds a day. Now take the national average. If you're going to get a premix at some feed mill somewhere, you're right around $25 a hundredweight. That could vary depending on where you're at, so just make that adjustment. And you're looking at about just under 13, let's call it 1,300 pounds a year. So you're going to be at $325 for your feed cost on top of that. And as you can see behind me, and I shouldn't say behind me, but over here is actually going to be, excuse me, the boar pen. You can see that it's made of stout construction. I don't care what anyone else says. When you're dealing with a boar that's 5, 6, even possibly 700 pounds, they can be very destructive. And as my grandpa says, hogs are like prisoners or inmates. They've got all day to think of ways to get out, and they get bored. So if you can find ways to keep them entertained, the better. But you need to have a decent size pen. And as you can see, the housing, the construction is stout. I've got like panels. That's a 16 by 24. Really, you can have a boar pen that's much larger, but I'm only keeping one boar. He's just fine. And so, but really, with your feeder hogs, you don't want them walking off all the weight with a large pen. But with a boar, you're okay. But that brings me to my point of housing and maintenance costs. There's going to be maintenance costs associated with it. I don't care if you were given a full setup. There's going to be maintenance costs involved. So plan on $50 a year for your boar, as far as to cover the 10-year cost or whatever that to depreciate out your facility, your pig pen, and just maintenance costs too. That might even be a little bit low. Again, I'm trying to give you some round numbers. And then of course there's always your vet or medical. You're not necessarily going to have a medical bill or vet bills with your feeder hogs because you're only having them for a few months. With your breeding stock, you might run into that problem. And so, or I shouldn't say problem, but it's just going to be a factor. So factor in $25 for your for like deworming and stuff like that, because an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And if you can prevent the parasites from even getting into your pens, it's going to save a whole lot. You're going to have a much better product. And you got to get a good dewormer, an ivermectin. Do not fall for the all natural stuff. It does not work. Sure, it might get some of the stuff that is already dying and it gets pushed out and you think, oh, it's doing a great job. Got to use an ivermectin. And we don't have a parasite problem here at the hog pens because we take preventative measures. So something to consider about. And last but not least, you can figure labor. As my grandpa said, son, if you think about the labor and your time, you'll just be depressed and you won't even want to do it. So in a way, it's a lifestyle choice. Obviously, you want to make some money. But all right, so what is your total cost? Well, you've got your $116 depreciation for the initial purchase. You've got your $325 a year feed cost, $50 housing cost, and $25 medical cost. And with that in mind, you're at just under $525. Throw in some overages because you're going to need it. So you're basically at $525 a year for to keep a boar. So there will be some other videos, and check out some of these other videos where I talk about, I go into some costs, because that's going to factor into your overall breeding operation. And that's something to keep in mind, especially when you watch some of these other YouTube videos where they're selling you the fantasy and the dream and the unicorns and rainbows, saying I made $50,000 with just $2,000 seed money. Ain't the truth, folks. I don't care what they say. So hopefully this video is helpful to you. Please like, subscribe, check out my breeding stock video series. There's a hog and pig playlist too, where there's a lot of great stuff. Please, I'm sure I might have forgot something, but if you have specific questions, please leave them in the comments section below and I'll get to them as soon as I can. And again, I appreciate you coming along and finding out just what it's like to live the high life here in the high desert of the Intermountain West, only on the High Desert Ranch channel.